Good morning, my dear students. Welcome back to the 8th standard science online classes. Dear students, a very happy Gauri and Ganesha festival to you and your family. My dear students, please use only eco-friendly Ganesha for your worship. This will be very helpful to prevent the environmental pollution and avoid the idol of Ganesha. It is done by POP. Please avoid the POP Ganesha and use only eco-friendly Ganesha idol for your worship. And then, my dear students, in the previous class, we have discussed about conservation of animals and plants lesson. In that, we have discussed about causes of deforestation and consequences of deforestation. So in this class also we are going to discuss about more information regarding conservation of animals and plants. Dear students, previously we have discussed about the meaning of deforestation and then conservation and consequences of deforestation. So let us quick revise all these concepts once again and we are going to move further informations regarding in this lesson. So what do you mean by deforestation? It is nothing but clearing of forest and using the land for other purposes like industrialization, urbanization and various purposes. This we call it as deforestation. So, what are the causes of deforestation? So, procuring land for cultivation or acquiring the land for cultivation or procuring the buildings, houses and factories. Construction of building, construction of houses and construction of more and more factories also will be leads deforestation. Why? Because the factories, house, buildings and apartments will require a large amount of space. So this will be fulfilled only in the forest only. That's why so that industrialization or the people will be cutting the trees for manufacturing or construction of more and more factories. This also will be leads deforestation and as well as it will be also causes lot of environmental problems. And even one more causes of deforestation is so using wood as a fuel for making and also making of furniture. As we know that we will be use the different kinds of furnitures in our home. So do you know how it is done or how it is manufactured? Yes, by using only forest or trees only. And as well as some of the natural causes of deforestation also is there. So that is a forest fire and as well as drought. So drought and is as well as forest fire also causes the deforestation. And then the consequences of deforestation. So what are the consequences? What are the problems that we are going to face? So that is increase in temperature and as well as pollution level, increase the level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere leads global warming, lowering of groundwater level, imbalance in the economic environment, decrease the rainfall and will be leads drought, soil erosion and as well as the soil will be loses the holding of water capacity, holding of water holding capacity. So these are all the consequences of deforestation. So after these consequences, so let us discuss some other points so that is related to the conservation of plants and animals. Yes. So how to overcome from these are all the problems. So we have to conserve or we have to protect our forest and as well as wildlife. As we know that all each and every living organism is directly or indirectly depend on each other. So even the wildlife is also will be play a major role in the conservation of forest. So that's why, as we know that the wildlife, so some of the organisms that we will be find out more in number, and some of the wild animals that we do, it is in a very less in number. So why these are all happen? Because of more and more human activities will be takes place in the forest. This will be entirely disturb the wildlife process, or whatever the wildlife of the organisms, whatever the lifespan of the organisms, that is entirely disturbed because of the human beings activities. So that's why we have to conserve the forest and as well as wildlife. How to conserve? So let us discuss one by one. See, forest and wildlife can be conserved by setting up areas like biosphere reserves, wildlife sanctuaries, national parks, etc. As we know that some of the national parks, wildlife sanctuaries we are named, and as well as some of the biosphere reservoirs. So can you tell me some of the very important national parks that will be held in our Karnataka? So best example is Ranganatittu. It is specifically meant for birds, right now. So like this, so some of the parks is there, some of the wildlife departments is there, conservation of wildlife department is there. So this will be play a major role to conserve the organisms and as well as forest. So what do you mean by biosphere reserves? So these are all the large area, this will be protected, or the protected land. It is completely protected land. These are all the large areas of protected land for conservation of biodiversity and as well as the traditional life of the tribals living there. What do you mean by tribals? The people, those who are living near to the forest. So we call it as tribals. And as well as some organisms is also is there. This entire biosphere reservoirs is completely prohibited the human activities. So in that biosphere reservoir is completely restricted area. So in that the human beings activities do not takes place. And then the national parks. What do you mean by national parks? Yes, it is an area. It is specifically reserved for wildlife where they can freely use the habitats and as well as natural resources. So national parks is nothing but these are all the reserved areas. In that reserved areas, entire the human being activities is completely absent, and the whatever the wildlife organisms is there in the forest, they can easily use any habitat and as well as any natural resources without any restrictions. So in the national park is also a play a major role for conservation of forest and as well as wildlife. So if the human being activity is completely absent means the forest is also grow clearly and healthily. Right now we will be find out a healthy forest and as well as a healthy wildlife. And then the next one is wildlife sanctuaries. So this also especially meant areas are specifically restricted areas where the animals are protected from any disturbances to them or their habitat. So wildlife sanctuaries is also one kind of government department of forest department is controlled by this also. So here also entirely the human activities completely prohibited, and as well as there is no construction of buildings and as well as industries in that wildlife and national parks and biosphere reserve areas. So in that biosphere, national parks and as well as wildlife sanctuaries is completely prohibited the human beings activities and as well as the construction of buildings, construction of industries and as well as some other purposes also entirely it is a strictly prohibited. Dear students, as we have discussed about biosphere, national parks and wildlife sanctuaries and their functions. So let us move on next one, that is biosphere reserve. So what is that? So let us discuss deeply. So biosphere reserves is nothing but it is a large area of protected land for conservation of biodiversity and as well as the traditional life of the tribes in living there. So biodiversity, what do you mean by biodiversity? It is a biodiversity is nothing but the combination of living things and as well as non-living things. If we come to the living things, all the living organisms, either it may be variety of plants, variety of animals, variety of microorganisms, these are all we will be find out in the biodiversity. So these are all combined together, what we call it as the mixture of or combination of living things and non-living things mixture, that is what we call it as biodiversity. So as we know that the meaning of biodiversity, so and as well as biosphere. Next, flora and fauna. What do you mean by flora and fauna? So flora is nothing but the plants found in a particular area, that is we call it as flora. Best example in generally we will be discuss. If you take the Tumkur or nearby the surroundings of the Tumkur district, we will be find out more amount of areca and as well as coconut. Right now, so we will be find more number of plants in a particular area. Only a particular plants only we will be seen. So that is we call it as flora. Fauna is nothing but only the animals found in a particular area. So for example, if you take the barking deer, blue bull, leopard, wolf, cheetah, so these are all we will be find out in the forest. And even if you take the polar bear, so this polar bear we will be find out in a particularly polar regions right now. And then if you take the penguins, that penguins is also found in the polar regions. So like that any one animals or the group of animals that we will be find out in a particular area, that is what we call it as fauna. And then a particular plant or group of plant that we will be find out in a particular area, that is we call it as flora. So as if you take the forest, we will be find out different varieties of plants and as well as animals right now. So in that plants, so we will be find out the group of different kinds of plants. For example, seal or teak woods. So teak plants, a group of teak plants we call it as in a particular area that will be grown up. So that is we call it as flora. The animals, or if you take the cheetah or if you take the barking deer, so where the animals or the group of animals that will be find out in a particular area or the deer groups or the barking deer groups, that is we call it as fauna. My dear students, in this class we are discussed about conservation of forest and conservation of wildlife in that biosphere, wildlife sanctuaries and as well as flora and fauna. These are all the concepts we are discussed here. Is there any clarifications regarding today's topic? You can contact me anytime or send a message through WhatsApp. My dear students, please stay home, stay healthy. Once again, happy Gauri and Ganesha Chaturdashi to you and your family. Thank you. Jai Shri Gurudev.